So let's talk about the Nigeria's Finance Act 2020, which was signed into law on December the 31st, 2020, and comes into effect on the 1st of January this month. The new law introduces over 80 changes to 14 different laws that will affect all stakeholders. But how will this law affect businesses, individuals, and maintain the delicate balance of risk and revenue for the federal government of Nigeria, while not burdening the pockets of the working citizens of Africa's largest economy? Joining us to discuss this further is Ayode Jebo, Senior Economist and Head of Research and Strategy at Greenwich Merchant Bank. Ayode, good to have you. Thanks for coming through. Let's get your thoughts on the 2020 Finance Act. It exempts low-income earners on 30,000 naira per month or less from personal income tax. Is that a welcome development?
Yeah, good morning, Boasin. I think it's a very positive development. If we look at the income structure of the Nigerian population, you would know that more than half of the population belongs to this category. And when you also look at that vis-a-vis the increasing inflation rates, over 14%. So that's when we look at the personal income tax based on the rate, the first 300,000 is charged about 7%. So if we assume that that's like a savings of 7% from the income that should be taxed on a monthly basis. So I think this is also positive, and we try to, it's also a way that the government is trying to show some form of support amidst the economic challenges that the economy is going through. So we believe that this is will be positive and will be well received, especially the low-income earners. And when you look at even the amount, it's about $2 per day, which it's significantly very low.
Okay, we'll put that in the box. So let's pick another one, which was about unclaimed dividends. And the 2020 Finance Act calls for unclaimed dividends in listed companies and dormant accounts balances unutilized for 6 years or more to be transferred to a new unclaimed funds trust fund to be managed by the Debt Management Office. And amounts this money can subsequently be claimed by the owner at any time together with the yield thereon. What do you make of that? How do you think this will be structured?
Yeah, I think this would, in the first instance, send some form of shock to the system, both the capital markets as well as the banks. And starting with the banks, for a lot of the banks, if you do a deposit maturity analysis of most of the banks, you discover that over 80% of their deposit will mature within 180 days, because for most Nigerian customers, most of the customers like to go short when they are placing their funds. So, and for most of the banks would have planned using what we call the core deposit. So you look at what's the lowest level your deposit goes within a certain period. And on the back of that, you're able to do some form of long-term lending. So some of these dormant funds in dormant accounts would have been used to structure some form of long-term lending and would create some form of distortion in those funds. And coming to the capital markets, there still needs to be some form of clarity as to how the claims will be made. Is it the registrars that will be making those claims on behalf of the investors? And how frequently will it delay the process? And I would also like to add that I know the Securities and Exchange Commission is working on trying to improve on the processes of claiming dividends and to make it online, and to reduce the new what I would say, to reduce the accumulation of the unclaimed dividend. So that processes they need to fast track it and make everything seamless at the point of onboarding new investors into the market, so that it will not impact on confidence. So, but by and large, what we can say on the part of government is they are trying to see how they can access more funds, which we still feel is also borrowings, and would also increase the amount of borrowings and also their debt servicing. If you recall, based on what they have said, they will be paying, there's a return that will be paid, though that has not been determined. but that would be paid on those funds. So it's also not free, and it will also increase our debt servicing.
Okay, so let's talk about stamp duty. One major contention over the last 1 year or so as far as the fiscal space is concerned. The Finance Act 2020 does away with the stamp duty on bank transfers, but replaces that with a new transaction levy called electronic money transfer. So the AMT levy is 15 naira on transfer of money in a bank or any financial institutions and any account on sums of 10,000 naira or more. And revenue collected from the new EMT levy will be shared based on derivation, 50% to the federal government and FCT, 85% to states. So what's the difference from the previous stamp duty?
Yeah, I think this is just a change of name. The stamp duty used to also be 50 naira, and now we're calling it the EMT, that's the electronic money transfer. Maybe there have been some instances where that stamp duty based on the bank transfer that is used in the act does not cover some transactions. So now it will cover more transactions. But also looking at the sharing ratio, if we look at what used to be obtained, because the stamp duty is also part of what is shared on a monthly basis during the FAC allocation, shared with the FAC allocation. And the formula that's used to be applicable, it still was 15% for, and it's still 15% for the federal government, but there's a certain 35% goes to the local government. But based on this new act, what the federal government is saying, or what the act is saying, it's that 85% will go to the state. So it means that maybe it's the state that will determine what goes to the local government going forward. But I think by and large, there's also a threshold that for any transfer, it's only applicable for transfers that are from 10,000 and above. Yes. So transfers that are below that amount will not pay the electronic money transfer charges, will be excluded from the EMT.
Yes, okay, but again, we have a lot of grounds to clear there, because if you do that, there are still the usual charges between the banks, as it were, and the mobile operator, whether you're getting a lot and what have you. So for those transactions, 15 naira has just been added because the initial cost will still be there, by the way. But this is a conversation for another day. I'm interested in this particular vehicle importation part of the Finance Act, which says there's a reduction of import duty on tractors, essentially for agriculture, agro-allied, from 35% to 5%. That's good news. Thank you. Now look at mass transit vehicles for transport of more than 10 persons and trucks, reduced from 35 to 10%, and reduction of import levy on cars or automobiles from 30% to 5%. Do you think this would make things better?
Yeah, I think just to provide some form of background, during the automobile bill that was set up to encourage local production or local manufacturing of vehicles, then that was when the tariff was increased from, at least for vehicles or saloon. There are different ranges, but average was increased to about 35%, so that to encourage local production. But when we also look at the total demand, it's still total demand of vehicles per annum is about 1 million, and local production is still about 15% of that. So I think government have realized that gap is still significant. So there's still a lot that needs to be done within the automobile space to ramp up the demand within that space. While looking at the importation, I think this is also very positive, because if you look at even for new cars, then in the automobile bill, there's what we call the import levy, which is 35%, and there's what you call the import duty, about 35%. So that's about 70% when you're importing new cars, as from 2016. So with this reduction, though it's not clear if the import duty on the new cars has been waived, but the import levy has been reduced from 30% to 5%, which is very significant. So we may also begin to see some form of shift towards purchase of new vehicles. Then there's also a new policy around the ECOWAS emission policy that states that new cars that are used cars above 5 years will not be allowed across the ECOWAS country. Once that is also, I think, is effective as at January, now the implementation will be the next thing. But within that space, we also, that would also impact on the cost of cars and also increase smuggling, because we know our borders are still a bit porous, and there's still a lot to be done in guarding that. So I think by and large, it will bring down the cost of importing vehicles. You see the agriculture, for the tractors, which is also used in production, I think is also a welcome development, and that would also encourage more investment into that space.
So we're speaking with tractors in farming and agriculture. The new Finance Act says a small or medium company engaging in primary agricultural production may be granted pioneer status for an initial period of 4 years and an additional 2 years, making a total of 6. So are you worried about that this pioneer status, new one, could be abused as the previous one?
Okay, I think the first thing I would like to highlight there is that if we look at the agri space, is the major employer of labor, and the value chain is where, if you look across the value chain from planting, also for storing and processing, we've not really harnessed a lot of the opportunity within the space. So the federal government is trying to do is to encourage investment into this space, especially for the small enterprises that account for a major part of the number of business activities we see within that space. I'm sure that there will be a structure that would have been put in place in terms of before you qualify to get this. Part of what I feel that the government is also trying to do is to onboard most of these companies, so that in the future, when they grow bigger, they will also have them on their database. So
yes.
Now that if you know that you are not expired, there will be some savings that the pioneer status saving, the tax that you're supposed to pay will be saved if we assume about that 30% for company income tax. It means that's a major savings, and it will be an encouragement for a lot of the industries or small scale industries that are looking at
within the agri space,
setting up within the agri space.
Yes, thank you so much. Ayode Jiebo, Senior Economist and Head of Strategy and Research at Greenwich Merchant Bank.